Greetings and welcome back to another episode of the Daily Run, and today we're playing as Eden. What I think is really cute in some scenarios is that if you look at the character in Eden and just how he looks like, he kinda looks like Ash, and if you don't know what it is, essentially Edmund announced a new game not too long ago, like 2 days ago literally, with a new character called Ash, and he kind of resembles how Eden looks like right now, so I just think it was a funny coincidence that I should mention. Obviously, I don't know if you're into that game or if you play any other of the Edmund's games. I would assume so, just because Edmund has become quite a big name in the community, especially if you're an avid fan of Binding of Isaac, and if you still play dailies this far into it, and especially if you watch these videos, I feel like you should know what I'm talking about. But nevertheless, we are playing as Eden, and we have quite a nice assortment of items. Our active item is the D1, which has a lot of breaking opportunities and potential, so we're definitely looking forward to kind of using that in some cases. But we also have the passive item, the Ball of Tar, and the Ball of Tar is a great item. I think it mostly has a purpose as a defensive item, and it just makes it that you completely nullify a lot of the enemies in the game. Basically, any enemy which is too fast or maybe has a charging animation or maybe tries to get to you in some way will be nullified by the creep that you leave on the ground, and that's especially apparent against enemies like Gertie or maybe even the Gertie Juniors or whatever, essentially any enemy that has a charge. And if you have a slow creep on the ground, if they stumble upon the creep while they're charging, they're just gonna be left in the place and they're not gonna be able to move. So for all of those reasons, it does make this item very good, especially because it just completely nullifies them and makes those fights a breeze. But it's also very useful against regular enemies because we have only 0.88 speed, so anything that kind of helps us get on a more even playing ground, or how could I say, that slows enemies down just a tiny bit so we can get away from them, is very useful, because obviously being at this low amount of speed just means that we're more prone to not being able to dodge certain projectiles or just some enemies running into us. The ones that come to my head are the Globins, I think that's how they're called, especially the variant which has a lot of speed and you can't outrun them, and maybe some other attacks, for example from Hush, and we're definitely looking forward to doing Hush in this scenario, so we have to be aware of our speed and just how it can negatively impact us. And at this point I'm not saying anything else other than that the Ball of Tar will definitely help in regards to that. But besides that, you notice that I swapped out my D1, and even though it does have some breaking opportunities, it's really not that much of a breaking item as it used to be. And the main reason for that is that they removed that synergy, or not synergy, just that interaction between the Yara rune and the D1. And prior to that patch, prior to Booster Pack 2, I believe, when you use the D1, it duplicated the Yara rune, and then of course allowed you to duplicate as many Yara runes as you wanted. You could duplicate the battery charges, then duplicate some other consumables, and that way you would be able to get an infinite amount of consumables, of course break the game and cap out your shred bonus. But that's not possible anymore. You can still duplicate every other consumable in the room, but you can't do that with the Yara, so it's not really as usable, even though you can still essentially get an infinite amount of consumables in some regard, if you just take enough time and duplicate the battery charges. But the problem is it doesn't duplicate every battery charge. What it does, it just duplicates one of the consumables on the ground. So if you have 3 keys on the ground, it's only gonna duplicate one, which means you're just gonna be generating an extra added key on top of that. And it can be useful with chests and things like that, but overall it really doesn't have much merit as of right now than just getting a few more consumables. I'm sure there's some ways to use it in which you can break the game and, you know, just duplicating various runes like Pertor runes or Yara runes if you try to go for that reroll or that break. But besides that, I really felt like in the situation that we were currently in, something like the blue candle would be much more useful. I just felt because of our low speed and because our base DPS, we didn't really have any significant stats or stat upgrades. I felt like having something offensive like the blue candle would benefit us more than anything else we could have possibly gotten. And that's exactly why I decided to stick with the blue candle, and that's why also I'd also think that the blue candle essentially helped us get to boss rush in time, and I'm really glad I made that purchase and that decision early on. Later on, when I got Godhead, I was looking to replace my active item, and luckily enough, I did get the blank card in the shop, so that seemed like the perfect fit, because of course with the blank card you can break the game, and especially with Sackboy now we're looking for a lot of combos that we can potentially utilize to either get an item that would allow us to do another floor again, so something like the Forget Me Now, or we're looking forward to just getting a lot of consumables, and all of those things are on the menu and we're just actively seeking them out. So I think the decisions I've made have been sound, although I do understand if you decide to stick with the D1 just because it does allow you to have that breaking opportunity, or because because it does allow you to have a bit more consumables. Especially on weak runs, I feel like consumables are much more important because you already have this issue of not being fast enough and not dealing with enemies fast enough, that you really can't be slowed down by not having enough keys, for example, or not having enough bombs. And obviously if there is a chest and you duplicate it and it contains an item, then what you can do, if you find enough rooms or enough charges or whatever, you can duplicate that chest over and over again, and maybe that will generate you a lot of good items, especially because the golden chest does have a lot of damaging items which can help you run along. And in this case especially because you have the Godhead, any damage upgrade that you're gonna get is just gonna be much more profound and much more influential, because not only is it gonna affect the damage that you do with your regular tiers, it's also gonna influence the damage that you do with your aura around the tiers, and obviously all of that is gonna be benefited if with your tier rate and your damage much more than if you just had regular tiers. So I guess I do understand if you decided to stick with the D1, but I think I made the right decisions, at least for the decisions I've put myself into. This was also one of those runs where people had a lot of a better experience than I did, and again, I don't know, maybe I'm just playing this in a weird day, but a lot of people said they found Magic Mark, for example, and some other good items in the Angel Rooms, but I just didn't basically have the chance to encounter them. And maybe my problem is that I didn't go to the shops and buy the cards. Maybe one of them had something like the Joker card, or maybe I should have blown up the shopkeepers or maybe even the judgments in order to increase my chances of getting a devil deal, but I'm not really sure. It was just one of those runs where I felt like I tried to do the best I could, and even though I made a really rush for it, tried to get a hush in time, it just wasn't fast enough for me to actually be able to complete it. And I really feel like I've put every single ounce of my effort and body into getting here, and the problem is I didn't even encounter that many dead ends, so I'm not really sure how much faster I could have been unless I did decide to stick with the blue candle, and that would have probably helped me out a bit more in the whole scheme of things. But once you look at the data, but once you look at the potential of the points that you can get, it really does pay out to have blank art a lot more. For example, if you even get something like the Temperance card, like I got in this situation, that is essential enough to allow you to not only generate eventually with Sackboy a way to get a Forget Me Now, and a way to break the game. And the breaking the game with a Shrek bonus is just gonna get you 10,000 points easily, which is by far more than you're gonna get with Harsh. And of course, when you use the Forget Me Now, you're gonna get something like an additional 4,000 points in total. So you're looking at something like 14,000 point bonus if you do take blank card, and you still have the opportunity to get to Harsh, so it's not like that option is out of the window. But if we got Blue Candle, maybe our chances of getting to Harsh would increase, but even if we did get to Harsh, we would only increase our score by something like 6,000 points. So all in all, it did look like this path of choice was a bit more beneficial, and that's why I decided to take it. So with the Temperance card, you might be questioning, you just mentioned that you can break the game, but how can you really do that? Well, first of all, I have 5 red health containers, and also have Virgo, which means that whenever I play the Temperance card, there's a chance that I'm gonna get a shield, and of course I'll be able to play more of them. With the Blank card and the Temperance card, I can just essentially spawn multiple machines on the ground, and when that happens, of course, and I play them, they will be generating coins, and some of those coins will turn into sacks because I have Sackhead. And with Sackhead, of course, you can get other things, mainly battery charges, and because of battery charges, you can keep placing the Temperance cards down, and eventually you're gonna get a card which is gonna be able to heal you, something like the Sun card, or maybe something like the Two of Hearts or whatever. And once you get that going, you can essentially restock your health infinitely many times and get as infinitely many sacks that you want from the Temperance cards by just playing them. And that would allow you to get essentially every single consumable in the game, and later on also every single item in the game, because when you play the Temperance cards, eventually they're going to explode into Ivy bags or Blood bags, and if you get a Purture rune, of course, then you can combo that with the Blank card and start rerolling. Because you have enough battery charges, you can also essentially reroll until you get the item that you want. And for that reason, that's why I decided to go to the Secret Room, started placing the Temperance cards down. I'm just kind of preparing them, because you need to have at least a few of them going at the start to kind of increase your chances of getting a good, not good, but just getting enough of that momentum at the start so you can start generating an infinite amount of batteries. You can see me that I left 1 battery charge behind, and there are multiple reasons for that. First of all, if I do get a Yara rune, I want 1 room where I'll just have 1 battery in it. I mean, sure, because I have the Temperance cards, I can always spawn more battery charges or more consumables whenever, but just having 1 battery charge on the floor remaining somewhere seems like the smart plan, because then I know at least I have a backup in case I mess up. But the other reason is also, if I just stumble upon maybe a combination where I don't get enough battery charges to maybe heal myself or use my Temperance card often enough, or maybe I don't have Temperance cards on the ground, I just decided to have like I said, is as a backup, and then I can kind of use that to go forward. So what I did do is exactly what I just described, but it didn't really turn out well. What ended up happening is every time I tried to play any blood bank, it exploded within 5 plays of me trying to donate my health to it. And I just felt like it wasn't really the time to break or to be in a position where I was, so I decided to just end the daily. I did get to 99 of every consumable, sent coins over that. I could have gone farther and just get a Yarrow rune eventually, and maybe even a Forget Me Now, but just because of how fickle the blood machines were and because of how annoying it actually is to go and pick up the sacks and try to find the Yarrow runes and the runes in general or whatever, I just decided to stop here and just end the run as it is. I did end up ranking in a not too good of a place to 120th, and my extraction bonus was pretty bad as well because I didn't find those secret rooms and second secret rooms at the start. With a Forget Me Now, this would have been definitely a lot better, but like I said, I just felt like the game was telling me to stop and I shouldn't be breaking that much anymore. Our Shrek bonus obviously wasn't maxed out as well, because that would, if you wanted to do it, we would need a much more surefire way of doing it than just playing a bunch of blood banks, because eventually they will break and they will leave pedestals, and that just makes for a much harder navigation in the room as it is, and it's already annoying because you have to open stacks and things like that. So overall, we finished with a 40,000 score on something I would consider a relatively hard daily, but I do understand that other people have had a different experience. So if this was a better daily, if I made some mistakes along the way, please let me know, because I'm wondering how exactly I could have improved that. Maybe I made some decisions which ended up costing me the game, but I think this was one of those variance dailies where some decisions mattered a lot and some didn't, and obviously we have no way of knowing which decisions influence the rest of the game in any particular way. So with that said, I hope you enjoyed this one, guys, and I hope to see you next time.